Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started today at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
New Vitamin Water Zero Sugar Pineapple Passion Fruit is packed with vitamins. Just like the amount of peas we packed in that sentence. It's packed like your tote bag. The one you stole from your ex. Or your overpriced half-a-studio apartment. Or extra rushed rush hour traffic. Packed like your calendar. Triple booked at 5, of course. Grab a Vitamin Water. Did we mention it's packed with vitamins?
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
At Starbucks, we've more than doubled paid parental leave, now up to 18 weeks. Which means Starbucks baristas can spend more time with the best company they know, their families. At Starbucks, benefits like parental leave are just the start.
Hey, thanks for listening to Reversing Climate Change. I'm your host, Ross Kenyon. Before we get going, I'd love to tell you a little bit about our sponsors. They make the show possible. I would love it if you could listen for just a minute while I tell you about Philip Lee, LLP, and Arbonics. If you work in carbon removal, you very well may have come across Philip Lee, LLP's work. I originally saw Philip Lee give a presentation about some of the common provisions within offtake agreements, and I was impressed by the quality of their scholarship and their work, and I'm happy that we were able to stay in touch and finally do this together. I think the law is an underrepresented part of what happens within carbon removal. We assume it's the background, we assume it's the mechanics. It actually takes a very smart and creative person to be a good lawyer. I think if you've ever had a bad lawyer, you know that there's quite a big difference between a good and a bad lawyer. And what's good about Philip Lee, beyond the good experience that I've had personally, is that they're also just the largest legal team dedicated to the financing and development of carbon projects globally. They actually were awarded Environmental Finance's VCM Law Firm of the Year for each of the last 2 previous years. And they have offices in the US, Europe, and the UK. If you have business law needs around nature-based carbon projects or engineered ones, if you're working with sustainable aviation fuels and the integration with CORSIA, anything to do with the VCM generally, Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, the CRCF that's coming out of the EU now, get in touch with Philip Lee. If you're working in this space, you really do need a good eye to the law. These projects need legal care. There's a lot of structuring that takes place. It's really not turnkey at this point still. And there's a lot more innovation and creativity that's going to be needed to make sure that the legal infrastructure that supports carbon removal is there. So, link is in the show notes. Go check out Philip Lee. Our other sponsors are Arbonics. Arbonics is great. They've been on the podcast before. I did a show with Lizette Luik, which I'll link to in the show notes too if you want to go listen to that show I did with Lizette. Arbonics is working on forestry in the Baltic states of Europe. Europe used to be much more heavily forested. The great majority of forestry projects take place in the global south, which is generally a good thing, but we also do need forestry to take place in the EU and in Europe as well. Arbonics has put out some great research recently about the state of afforestation projects, about the bottlenecks in the industry, why the high quality credits are selling out far ahead of issuance, what that means for people who want to be buying carbon removal credits for forestry but cannot. It's a really important set of questions that Arbonics addresses with grace. I would recommend you checking out their work and also just checking out Arbonics in general. If you want to support forestry, give Arbonics a look. Link is in the show notes there. Thanks for listening, and now I will go into the show itself. Thanks for your time. Here it is. Hello out there, and thanks for listening. I am Ross Kenyon. I'm the host of Reversing Climate Change. If you've listened before, you know that I'm a carbon removal and climate tech entrepreneur, but I'm also someone who's obsessed with the humanities. That's where I come from. I come from a background where I did undergraduate work in history. I did PhD work in political philosophy before deciding that wasn't the right fit for me. But I think it's so important to engage with the arts and humanities. I think in a field like climate, they're often neglected. But I don't think they should be. In fact, I think more could be done to make them the powerhouses that we know they can be. Most of the things that we care about, I feel like, have a basis in the humanities. We spend so much time listening to stories, reading, watching TV, watching films. Storytelling is very much key to who we are. And today I have a storyteller whom I really admire. I've watched so much of his content. I've read several of his novels. You may have too. Jon Raymond is the screenwriter who's frequently collaborated with Kelly Reichardt, which you might have known from their first big film that made a splash, especially in the indie world, was Old Joy, where you can see Bonnie Prince Billy. It's a road trip movie. It's two old friends talking about life. It's quiet. It's a lot about feeling and being. And it's not just about action, zippy dialogue. It's mostly just processing of life. I don't even know how else to put it. They're very hypnotic films in a way. The film work that he's done since Old Joy is wonderful too. I recently watched Showing Up with Michelle Williams, and I find her to be extremely engrossing in it. And again, to be a quiet, sad, meditative kind of film you should definitely check out. Mildred Pierce, starring Kate Winslet, in a miniseries from HBO that's nearly 15 years old at this point. It's just a wonderful period piece adaptation of a novel about the Great Depression and what it was like during that time. Much of his work has a strong ecological and climate angle. He wrote a film called Night Move starring Jesse Eisenberg about an eco-terror plot to blow up a dam. In his two novels, which we discuss at length here, Denial and his new one, God and Sex, are both strongly informed by climate. I have to warn you that there are spoilers here, but I don't think spoilers should prevent you from enjoying it. In fact, I find the desire to... How do you do a podcast? The podcast is to tell you that you should consume Jon's work, and it's worth your time to both view and to read. But if we can't talk about the substance and the theme of the books, then we can't really make a podcast telling you to go and do it without saying it's good and you should check it out. And here's some vague themes that maybe you care about. I think it'd be a terrible show. Jon and I discuss his work in detail. I don't mind knowing the stories of films before I see them. Same with novels. I find sometimes it helps me absorb the story better if I know the broad shape of it. And I'm curious how much of that surprise element is really necessary for appreciating literature. And I suspect it's actually not as great as you might think. So just a heads up, we spoil a lot of Jon's work, but I don't think that should stop you from enjoying this show at all. Denial is about a near future where climate has been addressed, at least partially, because there's been a tribunal where many people who are responsible for it are tried for crimes, but some of those people have escaped prosecution, similar to Nazis fleeing to South America after World War II and other places, and a journalist's quest to hunt one down. I think it's a really fascinating book. I greatly enjoyed it. God and Sex is a new book of Jon's that you should go and pick up. It's about a writer who's working on a book about trees, and there is a climate event that potentially produces a miracle. And there's a question of how to understand miracles and what it means to doubt. And even though you can be so sure of something, what happens in its aftermath. I'll let you get to the show in just 1 second. But before we get there, if you would please give a great rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to shows. If there's a rating and reviews function, please do it. It helps so much. I can't overstate how much it helps getting more people to see the show and listen to it. And also, if you'd please become a paid subscriber for $5 a month, not that much money. You get rid of the inserted ads. You get bonus content. I put out some bonus content every month of special parts of shows. In fact, today's show actually has some bonus content in it that I'm going to cut out. People who want it can get some little extra with Jon and I. Just thanks for listening. I've been fond of saying recently that I'm honored by people listening to the show, and I truly am. There's so much content. It's just absurd. I'm often overwhelmed with it and trying to keep up with the things that I think I need to, let alone want to. You could be doing other things right now, and I'm just glad you're choosing to spend it with me. I do not take that for granted. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day. And here's the show with Jon. So thanks for listening. Bye for now.
Hey, this is Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast, here to help you make the most of your summer with Michelob Ultra, a superior light beer worth playing for. Play for it with the guys when you're competing to see who can sink more birdies on the golf course, because winning tastes even better with Ultra on the line. Play for Ultra. Fill your fridge with Michelob Ultra this summer. Enjoy responsibly. Copyright 2025 Anheuser-Busch Michelob Ultra Light Beer, St. Louis, Missouri.
Today's top story, the flavor merger of the century between the Peanut Butter Group and Chocolatey Corp. Joining me is a PBC executive.
Thanks for having me, Barry.
Now, how did you know the merger and the byproduct of it, Jif peanut butter and chocolate flavored spread, would be a success?
You know, it was a gut feeling, a rumbling, if you will. Besides, they're two titans of taste.
Very true. Goes great with pretzels.
And pancakes.
Apples too, I bet. Try Jif PBC today.
I was deep in it, gaming on Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7. Unfolding the screen made it twice as big and so immersive, I kinda lost myself. Might have trolled a little too close to the sun. Someone in the chat told me to touch grass, so I took my Z Fold 7 outside and kept playing. Still won, got a tan, and a nice little reset. Powerful processor, realistic graphics, you stay locked in, streak stays alive. Can your phone do that?
The new Galaxy Z Fold 7. Get yours at Samsung.com.
Thanks for being here, Jon.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure to have you. I've spent a lot of time in your brain recently. Read 2 of your novels, hanging with Kate Winslet, watched several of your Kelly Reichardt films that you co-wrote. Really interesting work, and I'm happy that you're spending time writing about climate. I might not have predicted that from you, given your body of work.
Yeah, I mean, my body of work, such as it is, definitely falls into a kind of realist or naturalist tradition, I think, which I think people, rightfully associate with, small scale interpersonal dramas. People obey the laws of gravity and science, and involve usually kind of small emotional journeys for people. That has, I think that in today's world, though, that kind of relationship to climate change is part of reality. I mean, it is part of the actual, really often small scale dramas of our lives. And it's actually, it's popped up in the work I've done for a long time. Like, my first book, The Half-Life, dealt with, the early beaver trade in the Northwest, which in a sense was a form of ecological devastation. I've done a book or a movie about blowing up a dam. I've written a book about that involved a plot line about privatizing the wastewater of Los Angeles. And these are just things that for me, kind of, as a West Coast person especially, are part of everyday life.
Much of your film work, especially the films with Kelly, strike me as part of an outgrowth of Dogma 95 and Lars von Trier and the Mumblecore movement and the Duplass brothers, and things that are supposed to be relatively quiet, laconic. They're very personal. They have a sort of meditative quality to it. And granted, even Night Moves feels a little bit like that too. There isn't a huge amount of talking, But I also see a lot of stylistic divergence with your writing. I don't find that as strongly in your writing, maybe because you're so descriptive. They're still thoughtful, and there's a lot of third person omniscient narration happening where you're telling me about feelings and things of that nature. But I see those as stylistically very distinct. Am I incorrect about that?
No, I think that there's there's kind of a range of things. I mean, Kelly has is a brilliant director, and is I think the measure of her brilliance is how comfortable she is doing so little in a certain sense, or like really allowing the moments to breathe, the shots to linger. I think the quietness and the miniaturism of the films is very much about her and the conversation that I'm having with her. I mean, for me, a couple of those, few of those films are based on short stories that I wrote, and for me, the short story form is more where some of the quietness and miniaturism are most evident, maybe in the prose that I do. Novels are like a different animal, though, and they kind of need bigger engines, I have found, and those do tend to get a little bit bigger. And I would love to be able to write a novel that like existed more on the level of smallness of the films or the short stories, but I might be starting to figure that out, but it's still not yet really happened.
Wow. I look forward to reading that.
Yeah.
As pertains to silence, I think that's such an underrated aesthetic choice. I saw Tig Notaro do stand-up at Outside Lands seemingly a decade ago, and the stand-up before her felt so uncomfortable with silence, manic, filled every second with a quip. Yeah. And Tig would come out there and be silent for 20 seconds and then say 4 words and destroyed. And the amount of control that showed and confidence, I felt taken care of by her. And it was the funniest thing I think I've ever seen live, among the best.
That makes total sense to me. I mean, yeah, I think it is. That's like the black belt of artistry. I think is that ability to dwell in those silences. And I mean, often in those silences, it's where the audience has a chance to have a thought. And it's also in writing, it's where a lot of the expressiveness comes in, you mentioned the idea of describing things, and those can be, moments of like real lyricism and kind of what I would call ekphrastic sort of writing, which is the sort of joy of writing about visual images. And so to sort of get out of the constant talking, the constant guiding of someone, like is when something really interesting happens.
Which makes the contrast all the more striking because Will Oldham seems like a chatterbox. How do you rein him in for something like Old Joy? He seems like, once you turn that guy on, he seems like he goes. Maybe that's an incorrect impression. I'm a Bonnie Prince Billy fan, so I think I'm allowed to say that. But
yeah, I mean, I've loved Will's stuff forever. Yeah, I don't know him well enough in person to know how much he rambles, but he keeps finding new things. It's amazing.
Yeah, one of those artists like Tom Waits that you'll see pop up in a movie. You're like, cool, I guess Will's in this. That's great.
Yeah, totally.
Do you consider climate to be a hyper object? A lot of novelists and theorists of writing consider it to be one of those topics that's so big it's hard to see and hard to communicate about. Do you agree with that? And how do you deal with it?
I mean, yeah, in a sense it is, I guess, technically a hyper object as I kind of understand that. It does, create the entire atmosphere of our lives, literally. It is the air that we're breathing and the heat that we're feeling, and that does become sort of hard to navigate. But I think that makes it all the more sadly kind of juicy as a topic. It's brings like immediate kinds of existential drama and suspense in a certain way. The book I did before the new one was called Denial, and that was specifically about a Green New Deal that had a global Green New Deal that had happened. It was a futuristic book. I'm not really actually into science fiction that much, but this was a very soft science fiction book about a future in which humanity really did get its shit together and solve, not so much solve, but at least address a lot of climate issues, which also, created a certain kind of judicial issue, and there were like Nuremberg style trials for carbon criminals. And so that book became kind of a Nazi hunter story in eco drag, I describe it as, where a reporter uncovers a former oil executive in hiding in Mexico and goes to track him down. But it was for me like a way to try and just project a future period. This was something I was writing in like 2020 when we were having the mega fires here on the West Coast. And, the idea of somehow speaking back to this like unfolding, like very in your face apocalypse was like just a practical matter for me. Like I had to figure out a way to even comprehend a future as long as a 30-year mortgage, at least, like how can I, what could happen to make that possible? And thankfully a certain noir plot device allowed me to think about that. But yeah, to me, like talking about this hyper object is, it becomes just an ambient subject in almost everything.
Yeah, you can contrast it to someone like Kim Stanley Robinson, who's attempted to tell stories about climate by making enormous ensemble casts of characters that represent different points of view and experiences. And yours, it seems like you zoomed in really far. I think there's only a couple. Denial's a great book. I really like it. Also, you should send it to Stanley Tucci. I think he would be a great person to run that empty seat role.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
That's what I imagine in there. I'm like, this is
that is a very interesting idea. The film project of that is slowly making its way through the like world, but that's not the person that is like currently like hovering over that seat, but we'll see. I can't really talk about it because it's like too delicate, but that is a really interesting idea. I like it. Yeah.
I get a producer credit for that now.
Yeah,
once it goes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, my people will call your people. Don't worry.
Yeah. The back end will be hefty. Yeah, but no, Kim Stanley Robinson is, I mean, to me, a very awe-inspiring writer, and there is a level of research that goes into those novels and of just scientific understanding that is so far beyond what I could possibly reproduce. And so, thankfully, I had not read his work before I wrote Denial, because I would have, probably felt more worried about my own just sort of, groping for scientific sort of verisimilitude. But yeah, as long as you can't really compete with that, you might as well not even try, as far as I'm concerned. And do it in your own way. I mean, I like a smaller, like more intimate storyline as much as I like his giant global ensemble cast as well.
Well, if you style it in terms of noir, that's a genre with very strong conventions. We understand what that means. It can be a more contained story. It doesn't have to be how the entire world grapples with climate change. It's about individually distinct characters that have their jobs that they're working with. And actually, I think the zooming in allows for great contrast in Denial, because this possible Tucci character in my head is a very charming person. And yet he's someone that has been charged for high crimes and is a fugitive. And there's this question of, can this person be a good person and also be institutionally responsible for great amounts of harm? And how should we understand that? Is he actually a good person? Is there some degree of sociopathy there? Like, how do we deal with the personal and the impersonal bits of mercy and justice in our lives?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was, kind of a crime and punishment story. And as a couple of these have been, Night Moves has some of that element as well. I mean, this is, I think, for me, part of the realism question. I love this Kim Stanley Robinson stuff, and certainly Ministry for the Future reads in some ways like a policy paper in novel form, and which is fascinating and great. And to me, like the failure of a lot of science fiction I read is just how historically thin the characters are, and how they are kind of androids being manipulated. I in a more naturalist realist mode, I do think it's required to kind of test your characters and your situations against reality as you actually understand it, and against like personalities that are real to you, and that disgorges like very mixed characters and mixed bags. I have many morally questionable friends who I adore. I have I'm amused by a lot of people that I might diverge from morally in different ways, and some of them in very small ways. And I think to talk, I mean, this, I guess, is what literature is good for me in addressing, questions like our own culpability for climate change and sort of larger social movements. To read a newspaper, to read a policy paper, the perversity of human behavior doesn't really register. And in literature, it profoundly does, and you kind of have to understand that whoever is dealing with these problems is radically fallible.
I've been musing lately about how the empathy generation that happens in literature, good television, has typically in our culture made us more sympathetic to characters that we should feel stronger moral bright lines towards. Like, why are we so enamored with the anti-hero? And that's kind of a terrifying thing. And then we have an anti-hero that leads the country and we're somehow okay with it and act like maybe those things aren't as connected. I think too much empathy can maybe lead us astray too.
Yeah, no, I hear that. But I mean, this is, you can go back to Milton and farther to find like the charismatic Antichrist, that is, that's villains are funner to write. Villains are more interesting. That's just sort of a law of fiction, I think. But I think you're absolutely right. The kind of, the diet that we've fed ourselves. Yeah. I mean, I'd say particularly in prestige television of like satanic patriarchs is it is a kind of conditioning for this. And I mean, I guess that was why for me, I'll just go ahead and spoil the ending of Denial, but it was important for me that this like charming, not even a sociopath, but really just a charming, petroleum executive, does end up having to pay for the really the policy crimes that he was responsible for, even though our agents or our journalist finds him a good hang. It's like he does ultimately have to pay for that, and that was important for me. And that's part of the fun of writing too, is you get to exact punishment on people. And I've done that in a few books in different ways. But there was something else I was going to say. The other element of like sort of mass cultural conditioning that I think is really unfortunate, and this was a big part of the Denial genesis too, is there's the satanic patriarch trope that we have, but then there's also just the post-apocalyptic trope that is really like the narrative of my lifetime, of watching the world be destroyed in every possible imaginable manner. And, by zombie or meteor or, pandemic or whatever. And to me, that's also a similar way. It also becomes a death wish of a certain sort. Like, how many times do we have to imagine the world exploding on our watch? And that, for me, was part of the argument of denial. Like, let's try to do a future that is neither utopic, like, let's not pretend we're going to solve it all, but nor do we have to pretend that the world is going to die with us, that we can actually imagine that there's some sort of middle ground, which is a pretty rare thing to imagine, I think.
I think it's successful ambiguity because it doesn't lead to this like, well, who really knows? I think I'm still thinking about the climax of Denial where they're at a bullfight and the empty seat is still just, he's talking and pretending almost like it's not really happening. And you feel a great degree of pity for this person. You're like,
yeah,
wow, this is like a different lifetime of his, maybe, a couple decades ago, and it's finally catching up to him. And you wonder, like, how would I feel then? It's, 1960 and Eichmann gets scooped out of Argentina by Mossad. Like, am I somehow then thinking like, oh, it's different for Eichmann all these years later? Like, the answer to that should be no. But in your case, it doesn't end up being a really hard no. I end up thinking, like, what type of culpability should be applied to this person so long in the past? And how important is the symbolism of them now facing repercussions, even though they are no longer a threat? And what theory of justice are we even using? Those are the kinds of good questions I think we should be thinking about.
Yeah. And, in this case, it is different than Eichmann. It's parallel to Eichmann, but if you're talking about climate change, like, who's not guilty? And this is part of the debate that they have in that book is that, he might have been at the top of the corporate kind of pyramid, but all of the consumers were buying it. It's not like he was doing this into a vacuum or forcing people to burn carbon or to eat meat or do all the various sort of non-criminal activities that we've sealed off in some way. There's a lot of ambiguity. To me, that, you talk about the empathy generation. I don't know. I haven't heard that phrase before, but
Maybe my original coinage.
Yeah,
probably not, but maybe.
Coinage, I like it. But there's also, this virtue mongering kind of generation that we've entered as well, that very much likes to, portion out guilt, and non-guilt, and that there are, and again, this is part of like a long Western tradition of like a Manichean kind of worldview that there's good and there's bad and there's people with halos and people with pitchforks, and that there's this kind of justice that will ultimately be meted out. And that's just not really how the world works.
I agree with that. But then without any...
I'm so pissed still. Exactly.
I'm so pissed. I was going to say, but I also just absolutely adore characters like Jean Valjean. And I like these sort of like beautiful Christian martyr type characters who have a conversion moment and actually are just good. Like, there's not a lot of complexity to Jean Valjean. It's a beautiful story, but it doesn't have that.
Valjean? I should know.
Sorry, from Les Mis, Victor Hugo.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you too contemporary? Don't read the classics.
I love the classics. Actually, I bought it a few years ago, but I did not read it, so it's sitting on my shelf. But I
put it off for a long time.
It's
wonderful. I didn't expect it to be as good as it is.
I believe. Oh no, I'm sure it's great as a novel. Yeah, I have no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt like it would be like another one of those obligatory, like, okay, I'm making my way through this. I'm like, oh, I'm on every page. There'll be like a chase scene, like an important chase scene, and then there'll be 100 pages about how the sewers of Paris were constructed and how night soil is the most important fertilizer, and we're throwing it away down. I'm like, go back to the chase scene. You're in the middle of the action right now.
That sounds great. No, I do. I often like to read like a big 19th century novel in the summer, so maybe that'll be the one that I do this summer.
Wow, if I could have that influence, that would bring me great pleasure. So, We should talk about God and sex too, because it also seemingly is just structured around ambiguity as well. That's clearly the thing that we keep coming back to with your work. Was there a miracle? Is there not a miracle? This is clearly a question that's keeping you up at night.
Yeah, well, I mean, you did a good segue there with the sort of whatever theological epiphanic moment you're talking about in Les Mis, which I don't know, but yeah. So the new book is called God and Sex, which is, I recognize, a sort of ludicrous title.
Very provocative title, yeah.
But apropos,
Yeah, I think so.
it does have those things. And yeah, it is. It is fundamentally about a miracle that may or may not have happened in the context of an adulterous love triangle in Southern Oregon, and it also, involves a climate disaster as the sort of backdrop, but which at a certain point becomes not the backdrop and becomes very much the foreground. But there is a prayer that may have been answered in a moment of duress, and the characters are then, I guess, again, in what I would hope is a sort of realistic or naturalistic way, left to parse the reality of that, and I think the question of what would I or my friends do if the hand of God sort of gently touched something, how long would we believe that had really happened? Or how quickly would we re-narrate it in a way that was more acceptable to our worldview? That kind of provides the central spine, I guess, of the book. And if this sounds coy, I mean, I don't care too much about doing spoiler stuff, so we can
go ahead. Whatever's useful to you is fine with me. We can talk openly about it.
Yeah, I mean, I could go either way. So I guess we can see it. If we have to, I guess we can. But if we don't have to, I guess it's great to leave some mystery. But either way,
I think it's good reading for its own sake. There are plenty of those books that you know what's going to happen. They're still worth reading. Movies that you know what's going to happen at the end of The Sixth Sense. It doesn't matter. It's still amazing knowing what the twist is. It's like,
yeah, totally. No, you basically know, on that level with almost every artwork you enter.
Yeah, there's only a couple stories, right? There's just variations on it.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, miracles. Okay. I hear back from people who have had profound psychedelic experiences, paranormal experiences. Many of them come back to this, like, it felt so real now that I'm removed from it. Did it really happen? Did I think that? Did I communicate? Did the divine intercede in some way? Or is this some sort of physiological process? What actually happened to me? I think a lot of people do have that experience as it wears off over time. I think that's fairly common.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, as with any experience, the experience becomes the memory of the experience and the interpretation of the experience and the whittling down of the experience in some kind of way. The psychedelic insights being like one of the primary kinds of ones that way. So for me, unlike probably I'm expecting Victor Hugo or a Dostoevsky or a million kinds of religiously minded writers who are working in a more I guess a New Testament sort of ideology where, yes, there is some sort of revelation that can occur, some kind of change of soul or some sort of communion with a higher power. God and Sex is constructed in what I understand as a more apophatic tradition, which is a more negative theological tradition, which is built around the idea that you actually can never know, that there is a fundamental unknowing at the root of any sort of understanding of the divine, and that any sort of attempt to describe it or to articulate it is kind of doomed to fail, and that the best that we have is a sort of process of elimination as far as like what is not divine. And I think this book very much proceeds on the sense of absence and silence and lack of understanding, which is not to say it's not also infused with certain divine questions. They just are sort of left a little bit like in darkness.
Well, much of the book is about the back of the book describes it as being a new age writer, someone who's writing a nature book about trees, and it has a sort of pantheistic or panentheistic attitude to it, which I think if you talk to people who have feelings like all of life is connected, consciousness is a field, they express feelings like that.
Yes.
Those don't necessarily leave huge amounts of room for doubt. I think those are very positive thinking.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So why contrast them in this way?
I mean, it probably has very much to do with just a family romance that I'm dealing with through my life, which is a dad who was Buddhist and sort of with outcroppings into Sufism, and what would definitely be categorized as a new age kind of ideologies, I think, in a kind of sophisticated way, but definitely new agey. And that, if you wanted to put a bigger sort of lens on it, could also be called an American transcendentalist sort of tradition, that is that kind of, probably has some nature worship involved in it, and is pretty secure in its sense of a good universe sort of taking care of itself in some way. My mom is Jewish and is not like observant in any way, but definitely, I think, has more of an Old Testament sort of mentality, with a divinity that's much more insane.
Very rule-based.
Yeah, and is capricious and jealous and to be feared. And that sort of trying to sort of square the circle between those two has been sort of an interesting project for me over the years. I mean, I lean much further towards my mom's worldview, but I've wanted to leave room in that. But also, yeah, there is a pantheistic sort of nature lover in me too. So getting the hippie and the rabbi together are kind of it's a conversation that's been happening in different ways.
Do you think this book is pointed at the climate movement or people who are climate concerned, or is it much broader than that?
I mean, I guess I would hope it's broader in a sense, but but they all are so interwoven in a certain way. I mean, the other thing I was trying to kind of deal with in this book is, to think about, I as I had said, I had addressed sort of different kinds of climate things in different ways, and generally with a kind of political prism in mind, and the politics, the morality being sort of a political morality in some kind of way. And as we have moved into a period of history where really reality itself is being questioned by a lot of people in ways that are largely perverse and disgusting, like that some of the basic things that we take as reality have been withdrawn in a lot of people's minds. I mean, as far as the efficacy of vaccines or the fact of climate change at all. I mean, to me, I guess the sort of focus needs to get down even lower into like a more theological plane than into a political plane, and that there are certain like very fundamental questions of reality that I wanted these characters to be grappling with. And so, they didn't end up being the sort of topical questions of vaccines or fascism. But in my mind, that is sort of the ambiance of my own writing, that like, oh, I thought we had agreed that fascism was bad, and it turns out many people did not go to the same school that I went to, and so this thing of a miracle that someone has to sort of grapple with and kind of unravel in some way, yeah, for me is sort of surrogate in a way for a lot of different kinds of like foundational questions that are being undone around us right now.
Well, climate.
I don't know if it comes through, but it's like, I don't think it does come through. I mean, it's a small story, but like that for me was the sort of the atmosphere.
I like that climate still is a prominent part of the book, but it's a fact of the universe rather than the star of the show, you might say. And there are those old human stories too. Like both of these books have very strong themes of betrayal. There's a mechanic of betrayal in both of them that is seemingly very interesting to you for narrative purposes. Like you want to talk about the ethics of it. Okay, we'll spoil it a little bit. When the love triangle is revealed in God and Sex, the husband is very, very understanding, which is potentially even more aggravating than him becoming murderously jealous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, like I like people behaving like they actually would, and like there are plenty of people that, are not that they want their marriage to be destroyed, but they are not vindictive people and they understand that other people exist and they are actually mature. I get so annoyed in so much popular culture of just the emotional immaturity of people when it's like that actually doesn't describe a lot of the people that I know. People are much more self-reflective and not necessarily mellow, but just like are not as unwise as most people in popular culture are. Emotionally. Yeah.
Wow. Have you always felt that way? Or is that just something that as you've become older and lived more life, you've just seen more wisdom accumulate over time?
No, I've always, I think, felt that way. Like even as a kid, like watching movies, like, watching like those John Hughes movies as a teenager, I was just like, who are these people? This is so stupid. Like, this isn't really how people are, And I will say it felt politically retrograde to me, a lot of those, where I'm like, these are like stereotypes and sort of emotional narratives that are like, in that case, predicated on some form of like Reaganite, like nostalgia tripping. And it's just like, even as a teenager, I was like, these are not the people that I know. This is like stupid.
Well, your books feel I think the highest praise you can give to any sort of writer is that the artifice is hidden and those worlds felt real to me. And I'm wondering if they felt real, at least partially because the characters do have some amount of wisdom. You're like, oh yes, that is how people would actually act in this situation, have doubts about their own actions. And then once it is revealed to others, maybe they would have a degree of understanding as well. And it isn't just now they have to have a duel in the courtyard.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think everything needs to be reality TV sort of juiced, like of people just acting like idiots. And like, there's still plenty of drama to be had, in life, I mean, there's no shortage of like actual moral questions that you don't have to like, put steroids in. Like I mean, honestly, that said, like a novel is kind of steroidal. I mean, it's like even God and Sex, which is small, it's a ludicrous and large kind of device that is being deployed in there. But yeah, at least you can kind of like shape it in a way that doesn't feel insulting to someone's intelligence.
I've been thinking a lot about my life recently and how I've spent so much time acquiring knowledge and reading lots of books and trying to read the canon and be well informed and trying to shift over to wisdom as a goal of mine.
Yeah.
And in my head, I have this unassumed model of becoming wise where the problems do not get brought to me or I'm somehow above it and monkly. And actually, it might just mean more cases get brought to me because I'm wise and I have to exercise more discretion, not less.
Totally. No, I mean, I think wisdom is an underrated, certainly literary virtue. I mean, and I've thought about this really explicitly with like Ursula Le Guin, who to me is like an extremely wise sort of voice, but not lacking in flair or weirdness or anything. And like, yeah, and to me, the sort of moral engagement that you get to have by being wise or judicious is actually deeper and more intricate as opposed to like more aerial. I mean, it's like you were just saying, it's not that you're above it, you're just actually involved in the minutia of the scales, and it's I mean, that's that feels like a more rabbinic sort of quality too, like you're balancing everything out in the most sort of elaborate way possible.
Yeah, even if you are rabbinic and you know the law very well, the next step is to know which of those laws to apply and when also to show mercy regarding them. It's not, the laws and it's done. Applying them is probably a greater step.
Applying them is the pleasure, I mean, that's what's fun, and it's like, that to me has been like the enormous pleasure of collaborating with Kelly on the films. Like it is, it's a form of gossip that we get to engage in, with fictive characters, but that are informed radically by real people. And you just get to have those, those very precise conversations about particular people in particular situations. And that's a pleasure unto itself.
What are you going to be working on next? I know it's a dangerous question to ask a creative person that, but what are you excited about right now?
I have a novel started, and so that's kind of working up into something. I mean, it's still so far away, but it is actually something where I'm trying to do a book that does not rely on big narrative hamburgers in a certain way, and it's more like dealing with like a girls soccer coach kind of like life in a middle class kind of scenario, and that's kind of filling up my days right now. I have a couple actually really fun film projects going with Todd Haynes. One of them is another adaptation, like a miniseries adaptation thing of the novel Trust by Hernan Diaz, which was a really big book of late. It won the Pulitzer. Really widely beloved book, and that will also be a Kate Winslet thing again. So sort of returning to some of that team and format. So that's cool. That's great. Yeah. And then, a variety of other film things in different states of reality, so it's sort of impossible to say, but the Denial film project is not dead. It's definitely alive. So maybe that'll happen. Who knows?
Is it in development hell somewhere else?
I wouldn't call it a hell, but these things take a while, so it's making its slow progress, and I don't feel like we have been like assigned to hell yet. I think it's definitely still still climbing.
Is there a lot of hunger from the commercial parts of art for climate related stories? Do you find that to be a help or a hindrance or neutral?
I think it's helpful. I do. I think that I mean, I have no idea, honestly. My sense of the market is like non-existent. Like I don't know really what people want. As
people like me, like as many me's as there are, that's your audience.
Given my like chance, like it's these Kelly movies that I end up doing. So it's like these are not like major like blockbusters, but I do think it offers people. I mean, my experience, and maybe this is yours too, is in the, culture industry world. People want to do interesting things, and they're trying to like find ways to address big issues and be part of like a conversation, they generally seem to lack the courage to do it in a really like interesting way, but like they are desiring to do things, I think. And so, yeah, I think that people are drawn to things that are, feel relevant.
I think a really compelling part of denial that I liked was the prion-based illness, which I imagine will become more likely with climate change as meat becomes more stressed over time. And that's a very subtle way of talking about climate-induced disease and health risk that adds to the story, does not feel added for its own sake. It really ups the stakes in a way that I find useful. And yet it is it's subtle. You don't overplay that either.
I never call it mad cow disease. Yeah. Which kind of renders it sort of ridiculous already. But like, but that basic idea, of certainly of eating beef and well, I mean, there's so many ways in which industrial meat production is an incredible stress on the planet, as everyone really knows. Whether anyone will address that or whether we'll just like run headlong into all of the dangers, I would say probably the latter, like we will.
Yeah. I think it's where the smart money is. Yeah.
This has been super fun. Thank you so much for like doing this.
Oh, I'm so pleased that you're here. I obviously am a big fan of your work and enjoyed spending so much time with you recently. So this is a terrific little cherry on top. Thanks for being here, Jon.
Thank you.